because the world is full of, there's plenty of shadows out there. And if you're just like, oh, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about all that dark stuff. But if you take the time to actually understand both the shadowy aspects of yourself, the shadowy aspects of other people, the shadowy aspects of just nature,
yeah,
that's part of this. It's like an integration process, like bringing it all together and understanding why. Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin, your favorite spiritual analysts, here, helping you to better connect with this divine yet somewhat peculiar reality we all find ourselves in. Now, today we're looking at a deep subject. We're looking at integrating our shadow. So I scoured YouTube because I need to learn here. This is like a deep subject that I want to grow on, and I hope, you know, if you're watching this channel, this might help you out doing a little bit of this work here. And it's important that you don't just watch the front end of this video. If you really want to get the benefits of it, you're going to have to stick around to the end. Make sure, because there's some like helpful guides and like tips and things that you can do to help integrate your shadow and work through it and grow off of it. So the video that we're looking at, it's done by Clark Kegleys. He's like a personal development, Clark Kegleys, sorry. He's like a personal development guru who taps in kind of into some of that metaphysical, spiritual stuff every now and then. But he's got some great content. Go check him out. But for this purpose here, we're going to take a look at his shadow work video. And it's for like beginners. So this is good for like, you know, people who are new to this. So interesting that we're actually doing this, because I feel like for the last couple of weeks, I keep revisiting the whole idea of shadow work and doing, I feel like I've been doing some shadow work. And, you know, we're going to learn more about that in a minute, about what the heck I'm even talking about. But I think it's an important subject. I think it sometimes actually gets put to the side when it's a bigger deal than I think people realize. So let's check it out. All right.
In this video, we're diving deep into one of the most important aspects that you have, your shadow. It's the most dramatic shadow effect I can get. Maybe that. Most people think that there's three parts of you: the mind, the body, and the spirit. But if you really think about it, why don't most people get the changes that they want? People focus on their mindset. You watch videos like this, you read books, you meditate. People focus on their body. You follow health and wellness. You go to the gym maybe, you eat clean. I don't think it's three things. I actually think it's four things: mind, body, spirit, shadow. Once I started working on some shadow work and some inside stuff that I didn't really want to look at, I noticed that my life started to change, and here's why. Let me turn you around for this. Nice, we still have it from the other video. I explained this in our recent video, and we'll cover it briefly, and then I'll give you at the end of this how to actually start doing shadow work so you can see the benefits for yourself, okay? We don't always become our highest goals, the highest vision we can envision of ourselves. We kind of get sucked down to baseline right here of our lowest standards and the lowest version that we can accept. This is what we're talking about today, because a lot of you are like, all right, I'm pretty good on this. I know what to do. But how do I remove some of the blocks down here? If you don't do this, if you don't do what we're talking about in this video, what's going to happen is you're going to set some goals, you're going to make some money, and then your shadow side is going to kick on. It's going to suck you down. And so that's why most people have pretty much the same income their whole life for the same savings. You know,
so that's pretty important, right? Like this work that he's talking about, you know, if the claims that you're making are true and you want to become kind of like the best version of yourself, or you want to have, you know, some growth in your life, this needs some attention, right? So, you know, yeah. Does he explain what shadow work is? Yeah, he's going to get into the whole shebang.
I read that 75% of Americans are like 2 paychecks away from bankruptcy. Probably even more now since the pandemic. What is the shadow? Let me actually take you over to the library for this. This book right here, the red book, it's not a Bible. It's actually C.G. Jung. And I've read all of 5 pages in it. Probably, I don't know. This thing is so dense. Jung, if I'm correct, studied under Freud. Sigmund Freud, who's like, you know, the most well-known psychologist of all time. They said that the parts that don't get resolved in us, you had a bad experience, you had a bad relationship, you had things from childhood, they still affect you until you resolve them. Think about it. If you had parents growing up that fought a lot about money, maybe they even got divorced, you're going to have security issues moving forward. Or if you had even recently like a bad relationship, a bad breakup, you got cheated on, well, you're going to have abandonment issues moving forward if you don't resolve it. So my point is that normally it's as a child, but it can be recent as a young adult or even as recent as like last week. These things that we don't deal with, we suppress down. And just like you're doing a trash compactor, right? When you put trash in there or a trash can, those things don't go away by shoving that trash down if it's getting full. It just pushes it down deeper and it still affects it, right? And so that's what shadow work is it's looking at some of the stuff that we don't even realize we have, that we've shoved down deep and that we're still carrying around, and by definition, we're still affected by. It's important to also say that every intention that we have, okay, and you might be saying like, oh, shadow, that sounds kind of negative.
I just want to stop for a second because I could see some reluctancy right off the bat to like even approach this, because if you've gone through some trauma or you've had some horrible things happen and you've worked your entire life to get that all down there so you can like ignore it, you know, I can imagine it being pretty scary to be like, all right, let's unearth it all. Let's get it all up here.
Of course. Yeah, it's like you suppress things for a reason. But I also don't agree with him.
Okay.
Like, I don't agree with his definition of what shadow... Or I had a different idea. Maybe I didn't look... I have the red book that he showed, but I kept it like... Because there's some beautiful art in it. I have not even read any of it. But I thought that shadow work was... maybe I'm confusing it with a different kind of shadow work, like integration of the shadow.
Yeah.
You know, we grew up pretty in a pretty Christian culture, and there's a lot of suppressing of things in that, and guilt. Like, feel guilty, don't. Rules, don't do it, don't. Rules, right? And I think that my what I thought shadow work and what the shadow was all those, the opposite side of all that stuff you suppress, right? You know, that it casts a shadow. It's like, there's some truth to the idea that if I tell you, like, don't press this button, there's going to be a thing in you that's like, I want to press that button. And that's what I thought that the shadow was of the self, is all the unrealized, all the things you very rarely give voice to because it's bad. Yeah. You know, it's like bad stuff. So, or we label it bad or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like letting that have some time to come to the surface and acknowledge it. And, you know, like Jordan Peterson talks a little bit about it. He says some strange things in terms of, you know, back when he was a younger guy and working in the prison system and meeting people and asking himself, like, how could someone ever do that? Like some violent crime. Yeah. And then taking time to like try to understand how someone could do that, and coming to the conclusion that not only could he do it, but he could understand how he would enjoy doing it. That to me is what I consider shadow work, is like reconciling that stuff that you pretend is not there because it's dark and ugly, but it's in there, you know? And to me, I've, over the last couple of weeks with some of the things I've been doing with that, I've found it pretty darn cathartic. Is like, you know, because it can generate feelings of like, it can turn into like guilt and shame and all these bad feelings when you're just like, oh, like resisting something that's, you haven't looked at very properly or well, or taken time to understand what it is and why it's there. Because the world is full of, there's plenty of shadows out there. And if you're just like, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about all that dark stuff. But if you take the time to actually understand both the shadowy aspects of yourself, the shadowy aspects of other people, the shadowy aspects of just nature, that's part of this. It's like an integration process, like bringing it all together and understanding why things are the way they are.
Yeah. Well, one of the good things about this channel is that we don't have to be just learning this story here that Clark Kegleys telling us. We can come back and see what other people have to say about it. And I'm sure there are different variations of interpretation on the shadow. So we can come back to it in other videos. And maybe we're only in the beginning here of this video. So maybe he's going to expand upon some of this, and he might, you know, talk about some of the stuff you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So let's keep her going and see what he says.
Well, every shadow side has a positive intent. Okay, just like if you weren't included, so you have abandonment issues, the positive intent of the abandonment issue is so that that doesn't happen again, so that you are part of the group, so that you are included, right? So behind every negative action, there is a positive intent. And the goal of the shadow work is to look for that positive intent, reframe it to yourself as an adult, really heal it, acknowledge it, so you can move forward. It is amazing how well this stuff works. I just completed a 6-week coaching program where I was teaching a small group of like 10 people. And in week 3, we did all these shadow work process, and I hired a coach to bring in who's really skilled, almost like a therapist, and had them do shadow work. And the results people were getting at the end of it is just astounding stuff, okay? People are getting new jobs, people are getting new relationships, people are doubling their income. I'm not even kidding. Now we're getting into the how of this video. This is kind of the gold standard, and this is more of a play on Ken Wilber's 3-2-1 shadow technique. Again, you can do this out loud, right? Just talking to yourself if you're in a place where you feel comfortable doing that. Or you can do this in your journal as well. You can do it in written form, okay? Now there's 5 steps to this technique that I want you to try to deal with that shadow side. The first step is think of something you want to work with. This could be very obvious to you, like pain of a past relationship, a feeling of unworthiness that comes up, a feeling of that you need validation from others, a feeling of like a lack of confidence, okay? Or it could take a day of just sitting on what you want to work with. There's no rush here. The point is choose something that you want to work with that you know is kind of holding you back. Once you have that, you're ready for step number 2. We're going to get kind of metaphysical here, all right? But if you're willing to play ball, this stuff is really powerful, so stay with me, okay? So you're going to invite that need for validation in to have a conversation with you. Again, written form, speaking out loud. You can even envision like an imaginary chair that it takes a seat in, okay? Step number 3 is you're going to begin a dialogue with it. You're literally just going to start talking to it. Have questions like, why are you doing this? What do you want?
Okay, so this stuff that he's talking about now, I definitely agree with. And see, I would imagine that there would be a lot of people and be like, wait, are you serious? You're telling me to like start talking to an imaginary aspect of myself? I would assume that there would be plenty of people that, you know, especially if it was like we were in a group of people talking, they'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous.
It's probably not as far off as you think. I bet you in like say when you go see psychologists and stuff, this is probably part of the practice.
I think it's a great practice. You know, the point is it's irrelevant how it appears.
Yeah.
I think it's a good freaking thing to do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it seems like, you know, there's different aspects of one person, like they can be embodied by different radically different characteristics. Yeah. And so imagine like sitting down and like questioning that part of, you know, what's with that thing when you lash out? Why do you do that? What's going on? What's deeper behind there? You know?
Yeah, I don't think it's too radical. How far is this from just your day-to-day life anyway, when you're sitting in your car or something going to work talking to yourself?
But it's not like that. It is kind of magical though. It reminds me again a little bit of chaos magic. Like, you know, like you can manifest Batman in the room with you or something and talk with it. Like that is woo-woo, I bet you, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, but if you're going to that extent where you're setting up a chair to be like, okay, like traumatized childhood version of myself or something, what do you have to say? You know, and then you listen for the response. Let's let him finish so we get a little more context.
Want from me? What is the positive intent you're trying to keep me from? It's important to note here that there's no real script to it. And you're going to be surprised on how much is in there. So pause on step 3 right there, and let's briefly talk about this inner child. A lot of people refer to the shadow self as the inner child. Basically, the person, your version of you as a kid whose needs didn't get met, even if you had the best parents in the world or you had terrible parents, right? We all lack some needs. Maybe you're at school, maybe you're in a friend group, and all your needs aren't getting met. And so you kind of have these scars, again, that you push down, you suppress, and it affects you as an adult. It never gets resolved. So if you ever hear the terminology inner child, right? Inner child healing, that's a form of shadow work in a nutshell. But I like to think of it as your former self. Okay, the inner child lingo doesn't always resonate with me because I don't believe that every single thing to this day is because of your childhood. Like some extreme psychology people think. They're like, everything you are today is an effect of your childhood. And I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily buy that, because
you know what I like? Sorry, are you getting annoyed that I'm pausing it too much?
Fine.
I like the idea of not even necessarily agreeing with everything he says, but being able to use the things that he says, being able to use it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like once you realize that, like, oh, I can like, You know, because everybody's different, right? He's got a different mind than me or you.
Yeah.
He's his own thing. So even the way he interprets things may be different the way I interpret them. But it doesn't mean we can't take things from each other. Meaning there are things that I've said that you might be like, I don't like that, but I do like this thing. You know, I can use this, but I got to reject that. That's fine.
Yeah, that's part of the gravy of what we do here is that we look at so many perspectives, and you know, you can find the little golden nuggets all over the place.
Hell yeah.
There's very recent things that you can pick up along the way, say pain from relationships, pain from jobs, all this stuff that can affect you just as much, I think. So I like to call it your former self. Okay, we all have different versions of ourselves, and right now the version that you're in is very different. And that's the point here of what we're doing, is recognizing that you're not even the same person you were 7 years ago, right? Pretty much every organ in your body, every cell in your body, if you look at it from a molecular level, regenerates in about 7 years. But my point there is that we're always transforming into different versions, okay? And so I kind of like that idea that you are different today than you were 7 years ago. And so that's just a version of your former self. Now, step number 4 is to really acknowledge it. Now, here's the thing. You don't judge it when you're talking to this former version of yourself. Okay, you're not judging it. You're not trying to explain it rationally like, oh, well, you're wrong. Can't you see it? You're weak. All this stuff. Like, suck it up. That is not what you do. Okay, that can make it way worse, because now you feel even worse about this thing that you have, this guilt around relationships, this guilt around not feeling good enough, and you're judging yourself, and so you push it down deeper, and it feels like it's not even safe to come out even more. Okay, so you're just hearing it out, okay, and acknowledging it. To recap, you chose something to work with, you invite it in to have a conversation, you picture it and you talk to it, you acknowledge it. Now the next step is to integrate it. When we talk about integration with the shadow, okay, one thing that I found very powerful is to almost picture yourself going back in timelines, okay? And this, again, is very powerful, dense stuff, right? That time is really an illusion, because when you experience it, when you experience the present, future, and the now, it's all in the now, okay? Right? So if you look at it dimensionally, instead of it being this like 2D where it's like past over here, present, future, and you go this way, it's more like stacked like this, right? And you can kind of jump from here to here to here to here, because this is all in the now, right? That's a very, very brief explanation of the timeline right there. And so knowing that it's like this, it's not like this, what you can do is imagine yourself in your present state going back through to that event, okay, or to the thing that you want to resolve, and resolving it and seeing it go the way you want. Let's just say it was a time where you got cheated on and broken up with, right? Well, can you see yourself going back to that event and all the pain that you had when that happened, the conversation you had, and really comforting yourself and giving you the validation, giving yourself the support that you need, that maybe your friends didn't give you at the time, that maybe you didn't have any coping skills to deal with at the time.
I think what he's saying is like super powerful.
Oh yeah,
and
it's worth a try.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
why not try?
That's the thing. I always am like, I have this problem of imagining the contrarian version of that, and somebody being like, it's like, why wouldn't you just try it? Try it.
Yeah.
How would you get to lose?
I think anyone who's done any type of like introspection, self-reflection, that is kind of like what happens. Like if you spend any time in like deep thought for, you know, more than a second about like your past.
I thought he was gonna say go back to that traumatizing memory and like rewrite it, because I've heard people say that.
I think, wasn't he kind of like pointing towards that a bit?
I thought he was saying like comfort that younger version of yourself.
I think what he was saying was to go back and handle it in a way that, you know, maybe you were embarrassed by how you handled something, or it didn't go the way you wanted to, and you gave it, you know, more power than it needed. Maybe it was a bad breakup, or you know, doing something stupid. Going back and handling, like imagining yourself handling it way better. And understanding what's actually going on.
Well, I actually think there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to do whatever. Everybody's all in process, right?
Yeah.
And, but the idea of comforting a younger version of yourself, but like as of late, I've been more in the vibe of like, getting brave at looking at some of the things that are hard to look at. Now, I don't think that's for everybody. There's some memories that are really suppressed, and for good reason.
Yeah.
That, you know, you don't want to overdo your system.
Yeah, it's tough to know because I've heard some spiritual teachers who are like, you don't want to be digging it all up and bringing. Why would you do that to yourself? I've heard spiritual teachers go that route.
Right. Because of course, that's one vein of thought. But I also think it's possible to dig that stuff up and accept it for what it is. Like so many times people to comfort each other will be like, you don't need to worry because of this. And it's like, well, I want to not worry even if it's the worst thing.
Yeah.
I want the answer so that even if it is that the answer is something bad, that's okay.
Yeah.
So if I have an embarrassing memory, like which I definitely do, of saying something that I regretted saying, being able to go back and look at a younger version of yourself with like forgiveness. That's one of the big things of shadow work, in my opinion, is looking at all the stuff that you regret and everything and actually forgiving yourself. Yeah. It's tough. Because sometimes we don't want to think of the idea, people have been offended and it's like, are you kidding me? You telling me my enemy is forgiving himself? I don't want him to forgive himself. I'm just talking about a conversation between you and yourself. We've all made mistakes. Yeah. And I think it's important that when you're doing a shadow work that you're able to forgive yourself. Yeah. It's not productive. It's not conducive to productivity to be full of guilt.
Yeah. It makes sense what you're saying. Yeah. All right, let's continue.
And literally giving yourself all the resources that you have now to deal with that and heal and walk yourself from that past self to the current self and basically say it's okay. Not easier done than said, I know. But if you're willing to sit with yourself and do the inner work, right? And not just make this another video where you see it and you're like, oh, that's good, I intellectually understand it. No, if you're ready to get off the sidelines and into the game, pick up the journal, write down those steps, and really try this. And a couple more points here that are very important. There's no right or wrong way to do this, okay? There's more efficient ways to do it, and there's faster ways to do it, I guess. But even if you don't know all the steps, you don't have to go through like 15 YouTube videos and read like 20 books to understand this stuff, to make it work. Okay, you just don't. If you want to, that's fine. But I find that people who intellectualize things to a certain level, it kind of overwhelms them to even take any action because they have all these rules now. So if this is your first time doing it, get excited because you have the benefit of not having all these different rules that you got to follow to make it work and make it this big complex process so you don't do it, right? So congrats, now you're ready to do some shadow work. Let's recap. Again, you don't become the highest standards, you become the lowest habits that you fall to. And if you don't resolve this, most people just stay at a baseline there. There's the shadow side of us, which is pretty much all the stuff that we throw in the trash, that we repress down and we shove it down deeper and deeper, but it doesn't get rid of it. So it comes up, we project it onto others, or we don't deal with it and we need to escape. Or we carry it around with us and it weighs us down, it lowers our vibration. So shadow work, although it sounds kind of heavy and, in a sense negative, why would I look at the negative aspects of me? It frees you up to go higher, okay? It makes you take the weights off so you can lift up. That's the power of it. That, in a nutshell, is what we covered. And thank you so much. Let me know if you want some more videos on shadow work or any other topics. Post it in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, stop settling, start living. See ya.
The great, what's his name? Clark Kegleys.
There you go. A great beginner's guide on how to get started on some shadow work. I liked what he said at the end there. It was like, just don't utilize this as like an intellectual exercise to be like, I know some stuff about shadow work, but to actually do the work. I want to like go try what he said now. I want to go do it. So yeah. And for our audience out there, if you have done this or whatever, we'd like to hear from you in the comments. And has it helped you? Have you noticed freedom?
Does anyone agree with what I said too? I want to put that in the comments. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I had a different view of shadow work.
I think you just another dimension or another side of it. Because I think some of it you agreed with, and then other parts you were like, well, maybe it's not deep enough for me, or it's not touching on a side of it that I don't see. And again, we can come back to this again and see if there's some other teachers out there that have a different take on this. But again,
but what you said too, it sounds like a good idea to try what he said.
Yes.
And to go along with what he said.
Yeah. Give it a go. And let us know in the comments if you like this episode. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and everybody until next time, stay spiritual.